Good evening and welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. And when you go to the polling places, you frequently see that long list of judges to vote for. And everyone has the same reaction. I don't know who these people are. What am I doing here? So tonight we're going to try to remedy that to a certain extent. Our guest tonight, Stacey, who's running for Circuit Court Judge countywide.
Thank you, Kevin. Happy to be here.
Great to have you. So
it is a long list.
It is a long list. So let's talk a little bit about, because many people watch the show really aren't that familiar with the legal system or the court system.
Right.
What is the Circuit Court and why is it important?
The Circuit Court of Cook County is a state court that handles most of the cases most of the people would find themselves in. The court is basically a place where disputes are had.
So this could be criminal or civil or anything,
yes,
right?
like the state versus a defendant, a criminal defendant said, you robbed this bank, or you did this, or you did that. We have to try you and see what happens. And it's a place where people have a contract dispute, and they instead of dueling it out on the streets, they go to court, or traffic violations, or custody issues. And it's such an important race, it's such an important position, because that government official, the judge, and the court system gets in touch with and touches human beings, citizens of the county, more than any other office. How often do you interact with your governor or your senator? I mean, they make laws that
but you
affect
don't see
you.
them very often.
You don't see them, and they don't make a direct decision. They can't take away your kid. They can't impose a money fine. They can't put you in jail. They can't do any of those things. And so it's really important to know who these judges are, what they do, what their experience is, and yet nobody knows who the judges are half the time.
Well, that's why you're here.
That's why I'm here.
So let's talk a little bit about your experience, because right now you have your own firm and you're a litigator.
I'm a litigator.
So most people don't know what that is. So let's talk a little bit about what that is and what it means.
A litigator is a trial lawyer. It's someone who is in court, who is arguing to a jury or arguing to a judge, either in a trial or pretrial motions, asking the judge for certain relief, arguing about different issues, different evidentiary issues before you get to the trial. And so, some lawyers are corporate lawyers where they'll be representing a business and they never see the inside of a court, or they do a real estate closing, or different transactions that people do and need lawyers for. But a litigator is someone who's in the court. And I've had my whole experience doing that. I've been over 35 years. I started when I was 10. No,
yes,
over 35 years in court. And
I must say, I mean, I have witnessed some court trials and things, and they're nothing like what you see on TV, really. I mean, TV is
usually
kind of made up, right?
Right.
And so people need to understand that the real court process is a little different from Perry Mason and all the rest.
Right. It's slower. It's not as dramatic, because the lawyers oftentimes know what the evidence the other side has. There are dramatic moments, and it is creative, but it's not quite like television. There's drama in it, and but many times it's not. It's not that like television at all. Yeah. So.
And I think it's important for people to understand that. So because you go in with certain expectations, and if you have the wrong expectations, you go in with the wrong ideas. But then you, I suppose, as the attorney for many people who are going to court, since you're the litigator, would prep everybody to say, this is really the way it works,
That's
not
right.
what you've seen.
And part of the things that we complain about, how long it takes, why does a judge give them 30 days to do this, or how come the judge is taking a month to read the briefs? Part of the things we complain about, and that have some downsides, are part of the strengths. And I think that's apparent today when people are making opinions and shooting opinions around and clicking on the internet and calling each other names and, no, this is right, no, this is right, no, this is right. And there's not a lot of thought that goes into a lot of those decisions. And the court is our last stop between chaos and civilization. And there the judges need to take the time to read the briefs, to understand the issues, and to try to be as fair as possible. I mean, you have to move the case along. You can't drag it out, because that's justice denied. But some of the safeguards, they're cumbersome, but they protect our rights, and so it's worth that.
Well, that actually leads me into a question that I've asked a number of judges and judge candidates here about personal judicial philosophy. And by that, I mean, I understand that all judges have to follow the law. I mean, that's baseline. Um, but when you talk about moving things along and being fair, and this is the last stop, or the only barrier really between chaos and civilization is the rule of law
Right.
and the fairness of the rule of law. So how does one balance the fact that you have to observe the law, but there's always some gray area and you want to be fair?
Right.
And so how do you approach that kind of sometimes seeming dichotomy?
Well, I think the way to be fair when you've got the law and then you've got some facts and it's hard to see how they'll apply, listening and listening to the context, listening to where the people are coming from, listening to the way they experience things. And in Cook County, it's super diverse, and there's all kinds of people. And I hopefully am sensitive to that. Sometimes I tell people, you know, first of all, research your judges, okay? So there's plenty of ways to do that. The Bar Association reviews judges. I'm happy to be found having been found highly qualified by the Chicago
Which is
Bar
the best
Association.
rating you can get, right?
Best rating you can get. And I've been, there's several bar associations, but everyone has recommended me or ruled me qualified or found me qualified. And then do the research. My website, I think, will be on the screen,
Yes,
staceyforjudge.com. Look at when you get a sample ballot or you see who's running, you can find that on the internet. And you see who's running in every race, look at their websites, see what they've done, see what kind of things they've been involved in and what kind of work they've done. That's the way to educate yourself. So for example, in addition to my litigation practice, the kinds of things I do outside of the law. So I'm a pretty well-rounded person.
No, not outside the law, outside your job.
Outside my job, right.
Right.
That's a good point. Not
Yeah,
outside the law,
yeah.
but outside the job I do
Yes,
as a lawyer.
yes.
But this also relates to law, I've spent nearly 2 decades on the board of the Cabrini Green Legal Education, Legal Clinic. The Cabrini Green Legal Clinic was founded actually by my church about 40 years ago, and really wanted to provide access to justice for people who just can't get it because they don't have the resources or they've been discriminated against. And that clinic has really, as much as I've tried to help it, helped me see that sometimes you can't really make a good decision about something until you really understand where the people are coming from, why they did the thing they did. Are they going to be a threat in the future, or is this something that just was a mistake?
So talk more about that. So what is your experience with Cabrini Green and with the people who are in public housing, who generally, as you say, don't have the resources to defend themselves or even to understand how the system is working?
Right. Well, I first got involved, I was at the church where it was founded, and I was basically a supporter, from the outside. I would, support the clinic in various ways and make donations or whatever. And then I decided to get more involved and became on the board. And in that, you hear people's stories, you hear the needs, and so the clinic expands from just criminal defense, housing, like you talked in the housing area, even custody issues, family law. Many clinics, the public defender just deals with criminal work, but people that have no resources they don't dispute about money, but they'll fight about the kids, and that's really important. So we would represent people in custody. We also do criminal records and expungements. And in addition to being the board, I did some volunteer work where I actually represent someone trying to get their record expunged or the like. And just by hearing the stories and seeing what people go through and how hard it is to get access to justice is educational in itself to make you a better person and help you try to be more caring and more understanding.
Well, and I want to stress that too, because many people who end up in front of the court system, and then I speak about this as an outsider, but my understanding is that there are so many people who aren't prepared and don't have the resources to do this, and they get lost.
They get totally lost.
Or they don't get the right outcome because they didn't know how the system works, or they don't have the resources to bring someone who does. And so they end up getting the short end of the stick just because they weren't able to navigate the system.
Right.
So having your experience, and then as a judge, so for example, say you're on the bench and you see one of these cases, and you might see that this person on one side of this case is totally unprepared. Would it be within your purview to say, let's take 30 days here, come back when you're better prepared?
Or when you get a lawyer,
When you
it
get a
might
lawyer.
be a pro se. And that's one small way. It's a good example. Sometimes people come in, they don't have a lawyer, and it's the natural inclination if you're have this education as a lawyer and you're sitting on the bench, to get frustrated or to be like, oh my gosh, this is, the person doesn't know the rules, and to get frustrated and then take it out on them. When in fact, this is entirely new, it's scary for them. And so you have to deal with them in a humane way and at least listen to their story. And if it takes a little longer and you can't clear your courtroom as quick and get through the call, then that's the price of justice, right? To hear what the person's got to say. Yeah. And I think a lot of times you can tell a good judge by how they deal with an unrepresented person. And that's one of the ways. So
now you also have before the show you were talking about a number of other, a wealth of other experience. Like you've done a lot of commercial law, so you understand how companies work, you understand how bankruptcy laws work.
Right.
And things that give you a pretty wide range of experience on what might come before you on the bench.
That's right. And in addition to a lot of the work I've done, I've represented people that get hurt from like medical malpractice or product explosions or car crashes or somebody else does something. So that's one area, and those cases can get kind of complex. But also, because I'm a litigator and that's all I do, I get referrals a lot from other lawyers that, let's say a bankruptcy lawyer, they don't really have trials.
Yeah.
But then in some bankruptcy cases, they'll have what they call an adversary case. And so a bankruptcy lawyer would call me in to try the case. He would be the expert on the bankruptcy issues. I came into a copyright case, a federal copyright case, which is interesting because of, as you know, my background in music. I also love music, and I was almost going to take the deposition of Michael Jackson, and he passed away. But it was a massive copyright case. But so those different kinds of cases, they had a UCC case, which is a Uniform Commercial Code, which is, I represented a company, a business from some Chinese nationals that came over. And it was interesting to see them, first time in court system. And when I first represented them, they were very secretive. And then I explained to them how it worked. And as the case went on, they started to really see the benefits of the American civil justice system. So like 10 people from the firm came to watch the trial. Unfortunately, I won the case, but they thought it was great. They thought that the fairness of the system, the openness of the system, that was a really cool thing to see, the transformation of people who previously had come from a closed
and they were distrustful,
society.
I would imagine.
They were distrustful at first.
Yeah.
I'd say, let me see this piece of paper. Give me any contracts related to this, and I'd get 2 pieces of paper. I'm like, no, there's more, I can tell. Yeah. And then eventually they became very cooperative, and it was a really great experience, actually.
And what just switching over to foreign policy, well, what a way to exhibit firsthand the value of the American judicial system.
Yeah.
And brings us back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, like what is the value of the judicial system? Well, it's that and I think people, particularly in today's day and age, I think Americans maybe have lost sight of the central role that these courts play.
Right.
That it is if we consider ourselves a country that is the rule of law rather than the rule of men or rule of people.
Right.
This is the arbiter.
That's it.
And the courts have to be impartial, and this is why paying attention to judge candidates makes a real difference, right?
It does. It does.
So you mentioned a minute ago, too, some of your outside interests, the music.
Yes.
And so as you know, I'm a musician. We share that here. And so we talked a little bit before the show, but how do you bring these two together, being a performer and also you're a songwriter and have other artistic pursuits that you carry on?
I've done improv comedy for a number of years.
Yes, so I take it you won't use the bench as a trial ground for new jokes,
absolutely.
Right?
No, that's for sure.
No, but how does that experience help you to see things from a judicial standpoint?
Well, I think one of the things about the arts is that you're dealing with people with big egos a lot. And it can be a good thing because you need a big ego to sometimes create great works
to succeed in really difficult areas.
And also sensitive. It's really hard to tell someone or to be told, I don't like that riff you're playing, or that song is kind of lame in the bridge, and so even that has contributed to my human experience of dealing with certain kind of people and trying to deal with people honestly, but in a way that's not going to humiliate them, some tact. And also, it's just been a great, I think, so much of the law, trial law anyway, and I don't know what it's like to be on the bench yet because I haven't been there, but so much of the trial experience is creative and coming up with solutions. And I think there needs to be some creativity in some ways by a judge. So just being in the creative arts for me, it seems in some ways compatible with the law or trial law. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Well, it does, and before the show you mentioned that as a litigator you have to craft a story. You have to create a narrative in order to persuade a judge and or a jury. And that knowing these kinds of, understanding the arts and performance and storytelling, even music is storytelling, has helped you to understand that kind of creative effort.
Yeah, and I think that, especially for being a trial lawyer, because your goal there is to win. The goal of the judge is fairness and the right result. So in some ways, you can, if you have the truth and you present it in a straightforward, honest way, sometimes that's the most beautiful thing of all, and there's no way to fight it, right? And so, maybe as an artist, I can tell artifice or contrivance, and maybe the person's trying a little too hard or being a little too creative because their position is very, very tenuous. Maybe I would see that. But yeah, I view there's some artistry in the law as well. So I see them as compatible disciplines or interests.
Well, and it brings me back to earlier when we were talking about judicial philosophy as well, like understanding the narrative of a story, because there are these gray areas in the law, right? That listening to the narrative may help to shed light on what's really happening here, right?
Right, that's right. Backstory, like you might say in a movie or a play or a book. What went on in that person's life to bring them there? What caused the breakdown, like in a medical case? What caused the system to break down so that somebody got hurt? Or are we unfairly trying to put liability on somebody when there's not? And without knowing context and all the facts, and then applying the rules to the facts, you can't do it. So that's why we operate that way, and that's why we have a jury system where people tell their stories, one side and the other. And that's why in a lot of cases, if you're a juror or you're a person just watching, you'll hear the plaintiff, that's the person who brings the case first, has the burden of proof, and is accusing somebody, the defendant, of something. You'll listen to their argument and you go, boy, that makes sense. I'd rule for him. And then you hear the other side, and you're like, oh, maybe he's right. And then you hear rebuttal. So it's like you try to really think about it. And not all cases are that easy to determine. It's not always black and white. And I find that interesting.
So let's talk about that a little. In these cases where it's not black and white, and I'll talk about other judges I've had on the show in the past, and one in particular who had been on the bench for a number of years. And I asked him about some of these difficult cases, and he said, oh, I still have a mentor. And he'd been on the bench for 20 years. And he said, if I'm in a position like that, I know the guy I can call. And so do you have people who've been on the bench, or mentors, or people who you think you could reach out to?
Yes. In fact, as you practice law, you develop close confidence that you don't give up your representation of a client and listen to what someone else says, but they'll say, look, I've been in that situation before, here's my perspective. And I found most good trial lawyers to be very generous people and give you the time and say, look what I did, here's what I did in this situation, here's how it worked out, or why don't you try this, or why don't you look into that. Oh yeah, I think there's an old verse about, in an old scripture somewhere that says, there's wisdom in many advisors or many mentors, people that you trust. Obviously, you're the one, if you're a judge, that makes the decision, and the ultimate responsibility is on you. You can't shove that off. But, and you can't, I would mention this, you can't take something somebody says outside the courtroom and use it to decide the case.
Oh, right. It can only be what's presented.
What's presented in the case. But in terms of perspectives or broader concepts of the law, or fact patterns which are seem similar, you can take in information and think about it just the way you might be thinking about a case at night, or see something in a book or another case and it strikes you. But you have to make sure that you follow the law.
You referred just a minute ago to a sense of collaboration, that lawyers help each other out and stuff. And I was recently talking with some attorneys I know who were working in this case in election law, and there was and I knew the presiding hearing officer as well, and even the hearing officer said, this one guy on the one side, he was just such a jerk, he said, usually lawyers will kind of help each other out, and if the one guy doesn't know something, like there's a procedure he may be unaware of, they kind of, nobody's trying to screw it. They kind of help each other out because it's a collaborative thing. And he said in this case, nobody was willing to help this guy because he was just too out there. But what it brings up is the idea that even in an adversarial situation in a courtroom, where even it's a commercial case or whatever, and the people are arguing, you've defrauded me, you defrauded me, that there probably is at least some collaborative ethos in the courtroom where people are trying to get to the truth. Is that fair or not?
I think the collaboration comes, it's basically an adversary system. So the collaboration is more subtle in that when you have good trial lawyers fighting a case, the collaboration is in integrity to the rules in the system. That's the collaboration, is an unspoken one. Because, and if you're exchanging information in discovery, discovery is the pretrial stuff where you have to give certain documents to each other. You expect the other side to be honest and with integrity, and if they're not, there's consequences for that lawyer. But the idea is that we adhere to a certain group of rules. We want fairness for both sides, and that's the cooperation. It's not like you shouldn't be taking the interest of your opponent at heart, but you should be playing by the rules so it's best for both of you, and hopefully the truth will prevail. And the judge's role is more that the truth prevails. The judge's role, where the advocate is, I'm not sure I know everything, how it should come out, but I'm going to take every fact in favor of my client and make that argument. And the hope is that when both sides do that, with two competent lawyers trying to get forth their party's side, the truth will rise. And that's the collaborative part where hopefully the lawyers and the judge all believe in the system and believe that it'll work, and that's the collaborative part. But it's not collaborative in the sense of helping out the other side.
And I didn't mean to imply that, but yes, the idea that we're all here for the common good, essentially, and we know that this process is important, and let's make sure the process runs well so that everybody walks away saying, win or lose, like elections, win or lose, if there's faith in the system that, yes, I actually lost, my opponent beat me, I may not like it, but I accept it. And the same, I think, is true in the judicial system, right? That you have to be willing to accept the outcome as fair.
That's right.
So being out on the campaign trail, and I know it's hard for judges to campaign, what do you see? What kind of questions people ask you?
Oh, look, come on, what's your platform? They'll say, what's your platform? Or what can you do for me? Or things like that. And it's tough as a judge because, my answer to what can you do for me is really nothing that I can't do for your opponent. And that is listen, try to honestly apply the law to the facts, and try to make the right decision. And most people really are be okay with that. They kind of get it. And when they ask, what's your platform, they're just trying to figure it out. We really don't have platforms in the sense of positions that we want to push, agendas that we want to push, because we don't want to be committing to any particular issue. Let's say we have a particular issue that we, if we would campaign on, and the legislature changes the law, you got to follow the law. And so our pledge is we will follow the law, faithfully execute, follow the Constitution, and be fair. And that's what we can promise. So since we don't have big platforms with big splashy promises, we don't get press, we don't get too much attention, and we're way down at the bottom. That's why it's important to check the website, staceyforjudge.com. Check the bar ratings. Like I said, I'm really happy to be found highly qualified, and look at what we do in our spare time. What kind of people are we? What kind of things do we do? And my website's very specific with work I've done with refugees and immigrants, with the impoverished, even traveling to other countries to help with medical issues, and help with safe, healthy transportation. I volunteered with that.
Active Transportation Alliance.
Transportation
I saw that on your website, yes.
I got their Volunteer of the Year award in 2011, I think it was.
My niece is the marketing director.
Oh, really?
Yes. Claire McDermott.
Yeah. Oh, that's your niece.
Yes.
Well, it's a great organization, and it's trying to make people healthy, and it's trying to reduce collisions and injuries. and also just make us all a little bit fitter.
Yeah, they run Bike to Drive.
They
That's
run
one of
Bike to
one
Drive.
of the things
They
they do.
They do.
Yes. So in the closing moments, I also want to talk a little bit about your family, because I think your
Yeah.
kids have done some remarkable things, and I want
Thank
our
you.
audience to know about
Oh,
that, because
great.
it's a comment about you and your beliefs. And
Well, I have 4 kids. One is married, and my oldest is has a background in theater and music, and a very creative guy, and eventually got a job marketing. He's a marketing director at a large international law firm, married to his wife, who's a screenwriter and has 3 screenplays sold and 1 movie I just saw on television. It was a pretty cool experience.
and I want our audience to understand, breaking into screenwriting is really hard.
It's very hard.
So if she's actually sold 3 and
Yeah.
1 has been made into an actual film,
Yeah.
that's remarkable.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
My daughter, Elena, she's 24, I think she is, yes, living in Nashville, Tennessee. And she's making her living as a songwriter and traveling the country with a group called Maybe April. There's a plug for them. Elena, Stacey, Maybe April. My son, Julian, is a record producer in Chicago. Used to be in Los Angeles for a while. He's at a place called Gravity Studios. And my youngest son is a college student. He's a hip-hop dancer. And he recently appeared last year on an episode of Empire, which was very cool for a college kid.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he's still getting some residual checks for that. Did a dance scene with Demi Moore and Bruce Willis's daughter, Rumor. Didn't know who it was. He's so young. And so we really have had a lot of fun growing up with music and the arts. And it's brought us so close together. And we enjoy each other a lot and really support each other. And just have a remarkably fun time together as a family through the arts.
And I think that's really important as well, the idea of supporting each other. There's so many dysfunctional families in the world today, and to the idea that a family unit has come together and grown up, and that they all support each other, their siblings support each other in their efforts. I also think it's interesting no one has gone under the law, at least not yet.
Well, my son was thinking about it, so he went to work for this big law firm, but he loves the marketing. He loves doing that and thinking of creative ways to help the firm. So he says, I don't think I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to do this. But yeah, I wonder about that. My daughter made my designed my website, and through her experience with her music. So, the kids help out. They're going to help out in the campaign to the extent they can, and we always help out with their shows, and it's really fun.
Your wife is totally behind this as well?
She's a musician as well. So.
There you go. Yeah,
And a paralegal, so she's in both worlds.
Okay, so we're going to need to before the end of the campaign, we're going to need to see the family. Like the Bears were just doing the Super Bowl shuffle from decades ago. We're going to see the Chris Stacey shuffle or something.
Maybe we do the bench shuffle. Hopefully,
Yeah.
after March, we'll do something
bench
like that.
Okay. Well, I'll look forward to that. So, Chris, I want to wish you the best of luck.
Thank you
in
so
your
much.
coming election.
Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed talking with you.
My pleasure. So the primary is March 17th. Chris
Yes, it is.
Stacey, Circuit Court Judge, countywide.
Thank you. Thanks
right.
so much.
And thank you for joining us once again on Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. You can find us every Saturday night at 8 on Comcast Channel 19 and see us on the web at publicperspective.tv. So until next time, thank you and good night.